Hello, I'm Harry Cole, political editor of The Sun, and this is Never Mind The Ballots US Special, once again in association with our friends from Betfair. The race for the White House is little more than 2 weeks to run, and it's still as close as ever. What happens when the result is declared? Will we even get a result anytime soon? And is America really facing the threat of a second political civil war? The election is on a knife edge. The numbers of US voters that could swing the result could come down to just 150,000. That's the equivalent of 2 Taylor Swift gigs. Joining me today to pick all that apart is a giant of political journalism, Adam Bolton, who'll be poring over the polling data. And a big Never Mind The Ballots welcome back to Betfair's Sam Rosbottom. Sam, what are the punters saying?
Well, it has been a monumental couple of weeks on the Betfair exchange market. Remember the last time we had our US election special on Never Mind The Ballots? That was during the debate when the dial was moving in favour of Kamala Harris. Well, things have completely changed and punters are piling in on Donald Trump. In the last 2 weeks alone, £14 million has been wagered on this market, the vast majority of which has gone in favour of Donald Trump, which has seen his odds fall to as low as 4 to 6. He is really fancied. This also coincides with some significant movement on those key swing markets, and we can take a look now at the swing state map. We obviously know the Electoral College is where this race is going to be won and lost, and it's going to come down to those 7 key states. When we look at the map, we can see Georgia with 16 Electoral College votes firmly in favour of Donald Trump at 64%. North Carolina, a little bit further north, 62% he's fancied there. And the key one, which is worth 19 Electoral College votes, Pennsylvania, he's flipped it. He is now favourite. And if he wins Pennsylvania, if he wins North Carolina, if he wins Georgia, the race is over. He will be the president once again. When we look at those other key swing states as well, which are so critical in this race to the White House, we can see that ground has been made up in the betting market in favour of Donald Trump. Last time on Never Mind The Ballots, our US election special, Kamala Harris was the firm favourite in Wisconsin. That is now neck and neck. She was the firm favourite in Michigan as well. The odds have tightened in favour of Donald Trump there. Harris still leading, but things a lot tighter. Like we look at Arizona, 71%. He's really fancied there. Georgia, really fancied at 64%. But as mentioned, the key state, the Keystone State, as it's called, Pennsylvania, worth 19 Electoral College votes, which is the most out of all the 7 swing states, is favouring Donald Trump, which has seen his odds shift in favour of a second term. With just over 2 weeks to go, Donald Trump or Kamala Harris, the punters are favouring Trump.
Sam, this time out, just over 2.5 weeks out, where were we in 2020 and where were we in 2016? Is this going to move again? There was movement during those debates, during the big TV interviews, the odds move, but is it starting to sort of set in now for Trump?
Well, looking at the market trends from the previous US elections, around this time out, the punters are very set on who they favourite, who they fancy, and we don't tend to see those odds move too much during this period. I think we know that this has been unprecedented, this campaign so far, with what's happened with Biden, Harris coming in. We had that moment, didn't we, when it was during the debate and around that time where the odds flip-flopped so much. The lead changed on the Betfair exchange market 8 times from August up to now. But as things stand, the past 2 weeks, it's been one-way traffic and the money is coming in for Donald Trump.
Sam, thank you. Adam Bolton, those odds look pretty firm for Donald Trump. The polls, though, don't say that.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely fascinating, isn't it? If you go back to when Trump won in 2016, both the punters and the polls got it wrong.
Yeah.
If you go back to 2020, both the punters and the polls got it right. This time round, there's this divergence. You know, if you look at what the punters are saying, clearly favouring Donald Trump, but I mean, the latest from the opinion poll market, and, you know, opinion polls could be wrong, as we all know. He puts the average is currently put Kamala Harris on about 49% and Donald Trump on 46%. And what's interesting about that is Donald Trump seems to be stuck at 46%.
Yeah.
He's got about that in every single election. Whereas we're seeing now Kamala Harris getting more than Hillary Clinton, less in the polls than Joe Biden got when he won. In those swing states, very interesting. Basically, as Sam was saying, if one side wins all of them, they win. And what we got at the moment is a bit of a split. In the polls, Kamala Harris is ahead in Michigan, she's ahead in Pennsylvania, she's ahead in Wisconsin, she's ahead in Nevada, but she is behind in Arizona and Georgia, and which Biden won, and also behind in North Carolina. So, that does suggest there's everything to play for, and should also be said that, we're talking fractions of
the margin of error of these things.
Fractions of a change.
Yeah.
So the changes week on week are actually less than the margin of error. But as Sam was saying, Trump is slightly moving in all of those battlegrounds, or has been up to now.
What's your hunch? You've seen enough of these races to. What's your hunch where this is going? Do you think we're going to get a result on the night? Do you think it's too close to call? Why would anyone concede if it's this tight?
Well, if it is this tight, I don't think anyone will concede. And frankly, if it is this tight, it's going to be the loser is going to be in the sort of mid 260s in the Electoral College, and the winner's going to be in the low 270s. And obviously, people will dispute over any state in which they can.
Yeah.
I think that's bound to happen. And also, if it does happen like that, then it's likely that the states won't actually be declaring overnight. We'll still get some states counting for 2 days after. I mean, last time round, 2020, I was in Washington. Everyone had big election night programs.
Yeah.
Nothing happened. I declared the result on the Saturday.
Fizzled out. Right, Adam, just stay there. Let's go over to the States now and speak to Democratic strategist Laura Fink and Chief Strategist for Republican Overseas, Errol Moorcoach. Laura, how's that Fox News interview going down? Can I play you a clip from last night where Harris was got herself into a little bit of bother at a few points? See what you think of this.
The people tell the country is on the wrong track. They say the country is on the wrong track. If it's on the wrong track, that track follows 3.5 years of you being vice president and President Biden being president. That is what they're saying, 79% of them. Why are they saying that? If you're turning the page, you've been in office for 3.5 years.
And Donald Trump has been running for office.
But you've been the person holding the office.
Come on.
Madam
You
Vice
and I
President.
both know what I'm talking about. You and I both know what I'm talking about.
I actually don't. What are you talking about?
What I'm talking about is that over the last decade,
But
people
you're the
have
lever of
become.
power.
But
Laura Fink, what was the candidate talking about? I'm confused as well.
Well, we have to turn the page. She's focused an entire campaign on the future. And Bret Baier is a good interviewer, and I'll gather that he did not, that wasn't her best answer, but I will tell you, she handled him. So thanks for picking that one. But she handled him on every other answer, and those clips are going right now. And specifically to Republican women, many of whom voted for Nikki Haley. There's a lot of women in this candidate's birth that are, in fact, thinking about voting for Kamala, but this may be what pushes them over the edge. She talked about Trump's instability. She talked about his erratic behavior and his decline on the campaign trail. So overall, I would say that may be not her best moment, but she nailed that Fox interview in the lion's den, something Donald Trump can't bring himself to do.
Do you think it was worth the risk? Obviously, I mean, some of the interviews she's been doing so far have been to a slightly less sort of hostile audience. Obviously, it was quite a combative exchange last night. Do you think the risks outweighed did the results outweigh the risk of it going wrong?
Absolutely. And I think the risks are going to be proven to pay off. Right now with the race this tight, you have to take risks. You have to prove that you're tough enough to go against a news organization that leans the other way, and some might say is cheering on your opponent. So I would say it was something that Trump is not qualified to do, frankly. They're hiding him in not in swing states. They're hiding him in blue states right now. This guy swayed for 30 minutes to music and couldn't figure out how to run a town hall. So the advantage to Kamala Harris is that she has the skills to be out on the campaign trail pressing forward on offense, while Donald Trump is crouched in a corner and his team rightfully is hoping that he doesn't put his mouth in front of a microphone and make a catastrophic mistake.
Something has gone wrong though, because when Harris became the candidate, in the circumstances we don't have to go over again that she did in August, it ended up, she was far further ahead than she is now. The race is tightening, something's going wrong. And it seems to me the more interviews she does, the more Trump, sort of starts to pull away with it.
Well, that's a really wild oversimplification, but I will say this. We expected the race to tighten. And as all these races do, we are a divided country in terms of polarization. And so it really is about how do you execute in these last days of the campaign. And I would say Kamala Harris has the advantage. She's got the better ground game. The question is right now, Trump has the weather. He has the environmentals. That's what they were talking about in that Fox News clip. And that's what Kamala has to fight against. And it's remarkable that she's doing as well as she is. And I think you can credit that to the fact that voters may be a little sour on the economy, but they believe in poll after poll that she's the one fighting for them, that her policies are going to benefit their working class needs. And I think Trump is a little lost in space because he cannot complete an accurate sentence, and that is to his
well, you should have seen the other guy. Errol, what do you make of that? Trump can't complete a sentence and he's out of space. You going to take that?
Well, it's sort of hard to understand what she's trying to say, as though Donald Trump hasn't faced the most hostile media over the last 8 years of anybody possible. The sort of swaying on stage, there's a very obvious explanation involving other people in the room. They edited the video to make it look like he was confused up there. There's a lot of like low-level trickster stuff. In the end, the Kamala Harris campaign, they're reeling, right? The winner of debates, the winner of the election isn't the guy who's out there looking for the soundbite, looking to make this. She's had to make this offensive push because she's so far behind in the polls. She's behind in the polls. She's probably not going to win. And this is the last gasp of her campaign to try to throw something out there. She didn't do very well. But then again, it's a 50-50 election. She doesn't have to do that well. She only has to do, like you said, is to get those Nikki Haley supporters, people who don't support the Republican Party, into what it is today and see if she can win them over. If she can, it's worth it. But otherwise, I think she probably made a mistake going out there.
The Trump campaign seemed desperate to keep on the messages of the economy and immigration. He strayed a little bit back into some of the more wild rhetoric that we were associated with him in sort of 2020, really, in 2016. Is that helpful? Is he blowing this campaign? Surely he just needs to keep his mouth shut for 2 weeks and not stir up trouble.
Yeah, I think he just needs to play it cool. I think you have Donald Trump. You can't tell him what to do. He's going to play the game his own way. He's got his own style. He's the Teflon Don for a reason. Things bounce off him. He's a different guy. But yeah, I think it's probably advisable that he just plays it cool. He's got a commanding lead in each of the swing states. As far as polling goes, I mean, if you're tied with Donald Trump, tied polling, you're losing because people are afraid to poll. With Trump, it's easy. You call somebody, say, are you voting for Trump? They say no. You say, is your neighbor voting for Trump? They say, oh yeah, him, he's doing it. So all it is people are afraid to talk to the pollster. So if the polls at this point are tied, we've got a pretty solid look at this election. It's not going to be an easy one, but I think we've got this one in the bag.
Laura, is that do you think that's fair? Do you think there's a shy Republican vote that's going to see you guys looking glum in 2 weeks' time?
I think they've calibrated the polls, but I think that if you count on the polls, then you are in trouble. And this is a dead heat. I mean, I think the latest swing state polls show Kamala up +1 in 4 out of the 7 swing states. So I'm not counting on the polls, though, unlike my colleague. And I think some of this wild hubris is to the detriment of the Republican Party. We saw it at their convention. We saw it in the last midterm election. They're, counting on shy voters. I would say within the margin of error right now, when you're within a point, you have to have execution. And that's something that Kamala Harris and the Democrats have in state after state. It's something that I'm sure my opponent would concede the Republicans are deeply worried about. So if you're not worried going into the last 3 weeks of a campaign, then you're not working. I think you have to be on offense, you have to be inspiring, and you have to be able to attack your opponent over and over again, making those moments. I think Kamala Harris is doing that, and Donald Trump is somewhere swaying to YMCA. So I'm feeling pretty good, but the Democrats have to execute.
Errol, are you hubristic in this? Are you a bit too cocky?
I wouldn't say cocky, right? I mean, we have nothing to lose. If you look at the last 16 years, 12 of them have been controlled by her party. If you look at the last 20 years, 24 years, if you put the Bushes in the same camp with the Cheneys, who are now on the Democrat ticket, let's say, you have people on the Trump side who've been living in their world for 20 of the last 24 years. So maybe you can pardon the being relaxed for being confident. We don't have anything to lose. You guys run the entire country. You've been running the country the entire time. Everything that's been going on has been the purview of this sort of uniparty, the old Republican Democrat oligarchy. So the MAGA movement, the Trump voters, we're not nervous because, again, we have nothing to lose. We're in the pole position. We think we have a good shot. And if we lose, we still live in the same world we've been forced to live in anyway. So there's no real loss for us. All the pressure is on you, your candidate, and your side of the aisle, because if you lose, we're actually going to change the country in a way that would be demonstrably different than what you are used to. And that would be shocking or terrifying. And maybe that's why you're scared up to an election. But we have no fear because we have nothing to lose.
Laura, isn't the problem that Harris really is actually just struggling to distance herself from a fairly unpopular president and hasn't yet got an answer to that question of, well, hang on, if you're going to turn the page and if you're going to change things, why haven't you been doing this for the last 3.5 years?
Well, I think that's a Republican line of attack, and I will say that
it's a fair question, I think, that we didn't get an answer to last night.
That's been the Republican line of attack since day one, and
she is the vice president.
In the short span of time, she's managed to consolidate a wildly disparate base under one umbrella. She's made up that delta in the polls, improved on Joe Biden's numbers, made the race a dead heat, and now she just has to close it out in the final quarter. And I would say this, I couldn't even make heads or tails of what my colleague was saying, but it reminded me of how Trump talks, where it just doesn't make a lot of sense as you're kind of saying the same one thing and then contradicting yourself. I will say this, I am working and focused on ensuring that Kamala reaches the infrequent voters. And I think that's the challenge in these final days. The voters that are thinking about maybe sitting on the sidelines, maybe voting, and the voters who have not decided. You see her doing that in targeted outreach. And I think she's been successful in reaching out to the voters where she needs to do a little work. Donald Trump, nobody knows what the plan is. The plan is to make sure that he doesn't make a catastrophic mistake. So I think being surgical is really important in these final days. And I think she's going to do that. And she's going to answer that question for those voters as she has.
Well, Adam Bolton's still in the studio with us. Adam, you can see right there how polarising this debate is, how split it is. Isn't this really going to come down to who can get their base out on the day and who's the most successful?
Well, there's also a question of what is your base? I mean, quite interesting there to hear George Bush Sr. and George W. Bush written off as effective Democrats. The truth is that if you're talking about the Republican base, there are a lot of people who do identify with them rather than with MAGA. And one of the things that Kamala Harris did in the debate last night was point out that she had 100 prominent Republicans in Pennsylvania appearing on her platform that day. 90% of the people who served in Trump's cabinet are not endorsing him this time round. So, I mean, if you boil it down, the question is, can you see any reason why Donald Trump, given everything that's happened January the 6th, the various criminal cases, why any more people should vote for him? And whereas we've got this very divisive issue of abortion, where there is a lot of evidence. I'm not talking about fractions of a point, but big movements amongst female voters and white women voters because of abortion and rights against Donald Trump. So, you can see why more people might want to vote for Kamala Harris, and we know that Biden was seen as a liability because of his age. But, she did try and define it last night. I mean, there was that attempt to say, you're responsible for everything that Joe Biden's done. She had her chance on Fox News to say to people, look, it's going to be different. I'm going to do something new. That's why she's going out, because, as you say...
But do you think it's credible? Do you think punters will buy it?
Some may, women may. I mean, a lot of the analysis is saying she was really aiming for Republican women.
How helpful do you think Elon Musk was to Trump? Do you think that, over here he's seen as a slightly wacky, crazy guy, but, he is an incredible figure in US public life, right?
Look, I think the issue is not so much him jumping about on stage and saying he likes Donald Trump. I mean, the issue is the money that he and his cohorts, like Peter Thiel, are putting into the Trump campaign. I mean, in terms of raising campaign funds, in terms of getting people to register to vote and paying them to come, to go out and campaign, that can really make a difference. And he is concentrating on that swing state of Pennsylvania.
Laura and Errol are still with us. Guys, looking forward to November, possibly election night, possibly the weeks around it. Given how close this race is, do you think either side are actually going to concede on election night? Laura, this is going to end up in court, isn't it?
There's a difference between conceding on election night. We know that ballots take time to count. And so we know that in close races that there is a delay. And so you have to allow the ballots to be properly counted. I think the question is, will you accept the results of the election? And Donald Trump thus far has said that he will not.
But will the left in the United States accept another Trump victory? Your own candidate says he's not a legitimate candidate. So you're already laying the seeds there, aren't you?
We're not making noise saying that we are not going to accept the results of a free and fair election. The other side is, and that's dangerous territory for any democracy and for everyone, no matter what your political stripe. So I think they're preparing for that. And the overconfidence is part of that, the sort of framing it as Trump should have won. And I think it's dangerous. It's what led to January 6th, and we do not need a repeat of that behavior. But I worry that with the rhetoric coming out of Trump and Vance and the Republican Party, that we may be headed for more strife.
Errol, are we going to see scenes like we saw in 2021 in January?
Well, unlikely that would repeat itself. Unlikely that anybody would concede on election night, probably just at the pace that some states are counting. I think likely this one is going to come down to either candidate winning by a pretty large margin. I don't think it's going to be pretty tight. I think somebody's going to win a majority of the swing states, and they're going to have a pretty clear path after the first ballots come in. But that's neither here nor there. We have to see how it goes. We have to let it play out. But I do think that it's going to be a decisive victory regardless. So it might not be day one, but day two, day three. I don't think it'll get dragged out too long. Either we win or we lose. It'll be pretty clear from the start, I think.
What happens to the Republican Party if you do lose? Obviously it's almost unrecognisable as an organisation as it was 10, 15 years ago. It is Donald Trump's party now. He won't be able to run again if he wins. And if he loses, he's really going to have another 4 years of this? What do you think happens to him in that scenario?
No, it's a great question, right? Because, he obliterated the existing Republican Party that was there. The players who used to be there no longer are part of the party in a lot of respects, at least how the voters see it. I think if he loses, the party, interestingly, you've had so much young people come into the fold. You have new candidates, people like Vivek. You've got, different MAGA sort of mentality that's come in. You have a whole new generation of people he's inspired. So on the silver lining, if we lose, there's a whole new generation of people who've been inspired by President Trump who want to make a difference civically in this country. That's great. But I think we're going to win. And I think when we win, we're going to have President Trump who's had that 4 years of experience in the White House. He had the 4 years of being very sad outside of the White House the last 4 years. And then he'll go back, and now he's going to have some of the experience, know which players to bring, which players not to bring. And I think it's going to be a good, productive presidency. But if we lose, I think the party just will totally reinvent itself like it's done in the last 10 years. Totally unrecognizable now, will be totally unrecognizable in 10 years.
Guys, Errol, thank you. Laura, just one very quick final word. You guys going to win?
It's a dead heat. Anybody that says they know the answer is...
If you were a betting woman, what would you say?
I'm sorry.
No, we'll have to leave it there. Guys, thank you. Errol Moore, coach. Laura, thank you very much. Don't go away. Now, scenes of rioters storming the Capitol following Donald Trump's defeat at the last election will be on many Americans' minds when it comes to voting this time round. But how real is the threat of widespread violence? Could the US election result, whatever the outcome, really spark a political civil war? I'm joined now by former US intelligence officer Don Bramer to see just how real that threat is. Don, Donald Trump said last night that January the 6th, 2021 was a day of love. Is that how you remember it?
Watching January 6th from our office windows, not quite how I remember it. But what I will say, it was a bad day for America, but it was something that, was building. And, if you look back to 2016, when President Trump won the first time, a lot of people have forgotten those riots here in Washington. While they weren't as bad, I recall having to step over people laying in the streets in protest, setting themselves on fire, and that was just 8 years ago.
How are you preparing for the hopefully peaceful transition of power over there? Is there a lot of preparation going into the fact that the violence, as you say, could come on both sides?
I think if you look around Washington right now, there's a lot of lessons learned from January 6th, but also from the recent visit of President Netanyahu. It was another day of destruction here in Washington. So, as we become more and more polarized, and a lot of it is from saboteurs and provocateurs that come across the borders that want to instigate and want to get people, I guess, for lack of a better word, riled up so that they can create this kind of damage and turmoil.
Who do you think's to blame for stirring that up? Obviously, Donald Trump would heavily dispute that he was, and he has had to defend himself on many occasions over the last 4 years and his role in it. But who was stirring it up, and who do you fear is stirring it up now? You're talking
I think there's a lot
domestic
of,
agents, foreign agents?
I think there are foreign agents involved. I think there are social media influencers that are looking for, that next 1,000 likes. I think there are media people, not from different extremist medias, that want to create the story, want to narrate the story, and choose what angle they film from. And then people who aren't in Washington, who aren't in Chicago, New York, who are in the middle of the country or in the middle of the world, they don't see the surrounding, they just see what's behind the camera.
How do you feel, though, regardless of the result, whoever wins, how is the next president going to bring the country together? We see from the campus protests, the anti-Israel protests, the pro-Gaza stuff, through to the scenes we've seen on the right. Is there any hope that the next president is going to be able to tie things up?
Yeah, we heard in President Biden's inaugural speech that he was going to bring this country back together. And I think we've seen the extreme opposite of that, and much not to his blame. A lot of this has been, our young people are fed. We have agents that come in that provoke. People have made a career out of being protesters, and I think those are the people we need to identify. I think one way to bring this back in is to actually identify those who are behind it and start turning it to legal matters, prosecute, and then make sure that we can put a quest on it.
We've seen recently the US Justice unsealed documents regarding Russian influence on some prominent social media figures on the right. Do you think a similar thing is happening on the left as well? Is there other foreign influence on your elections?
I think it's not just Russia. I think you could look at every one of our Western our adversaries of the West and know that they are targeting Democrat and Republican sides. One thing that benefits the world is if we make both parties look more extreme, whether it's extremely more MAGA or extremely more progressive on the Democratic side. And because of that, you've seen both parties evolve into something that neither one are recognizable to what they were 20 years ago.
Don, stay there. I'm going to bring him in, Adam Bolton. Adam, you were in Washington also on the 6th of January. Do you fear seeing scenes like that again?
Well, I was there just after the 6th because it was COVID time.
Of course, it took you a while to get out there.
And I actually had a visa to go to the inauguration, so we got out within 24 hours. And that was extraordinary. I mean, I've lived in Washington, D.C. a number of times, and to just see the progressive rings of steel that were being built around the Capitol building, and then, of course, partly because of COVID, partly for security, when it came to the inauguration, there were no crowds. They simply had a field of flags in the mall. But the tension actually went back all the way to election night because Washington, D.C. is a very democratic town. And all the shops and bars around the White House were boarded up before the vote, for about a week before the vote, because people feared that were Trump to be re-elected, there would be demonstrations on the street. And it was quite a dramatic change that the shops stayed boarded up. And then when it was confirmed that Biden had won, suddenly turned into a sunny day, weekend suddenly turned into a street party. So going all the way back to the Million Man March and all that, Washington is kind of built for demonstrations. I mean, 2016 when Trump won, the weekend after he won, there was a massive feminist demonstration.
I remember, yeah.
So you see, it is almost designed as somewhere where there are protests. And the interesting thing this time around is going to be January the 6th. That's the congressional day where the vice president of the time, as the Speaker of the Senate, certifies the result. And guess who that is? Kamala Harris is either going to be certifying her victory or her defeat.
Don, what are you doing to prepare for Election Day? Adam there pointing out things are being boarded up. Has that started already in Washington? What do you recommend people do to prepare in the nation's capital?
I think here in D.C., you're already seeing gates and fences going up around the Capitol grounds. Many of those haven't been taken down since Netanyahu was here, but those will be reinforced. A lot of lessons were learned on what needs to be done so that we don't have a repeat. But I know for many firms and many offices here in Washington, ours included. Election week, we'll be working from home that week, just as we will for inauguration week.
Just avoid the Capitol completely for as an abundance of caution.
Well, I believe if you have teammates that take public transit, it's in the best interest that they avoid those situations and not put themselves in harm's way.
Don Braber, stay safe. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Now, behind the scenes, furious diplomatic efforts will be going into preparing for a Trump or a Harris White House and what it would mean for Britain. Joining us, former Tory MP, former Lord Chancellor making his Never Mind the Ballots debut, yes. I believe.
Yes, honoured.
Robert Buckland, welcome to Never Mind the Ballots. You, a Tory, have been out campaigning for the Democrats.
Well, I'm not alone. A lot of good Republicans have been doing exactly the same, from Dick Cheney downwards. 100 signed a letter only last week. And why? It's because people like Dick Cheney, people like traditional Republicans and me, a traditional Tory, believe in the rule of law. And the big problem with Donald Trump is that he doesn't. January the 6th, I think, was the clearest sign that this is a president who believes in himself above everybody else. The United States is a republic that is built upon a very delicate balance. And having a chief executive who doesn't respect that, especially at this time of international instability, I think would be bad, not just for the United States, but for the wider world. So I thought I'd better get involved.
So this is an anti-Trump thing. I mean, with all the greatest respect, no one would ever call you a hard right-winger at the best of times.
Appalled if
would you feel more comfortable with the Democrats, or is it specifically an anti-Trump thing?
I'm really uncomfortable with the fact that the grand old party of Lincoln and Theodore Roosevelt and Dwight Eisenhower and Ronald Reagan is being taken over by a movement that is clearly not in those great traditions. They're against free trade. They're against the internationalist approach that has benefited the United States. I think that MAGA movement needs to be checked. And the best way to check it in this election is to get Harris in.
So what have you been doing? You've been out in the States. Where were you campaigning?
Yeah, I've been over in New England. Now, I know people would say, well, that's a slam dunk. I was in a bit of a more Republican area of Connecticut just to take the temperature. I've been on the doors. What I've noticed is that clearly this male-female thing is an absolute factor. Women are very motivated to go and vote. They're going to vote for abortion rights and women's rights. I think the male vote, particularly white working class men, is clearly much more motivated by the economy. And there is an issue for the Democrats. The cost of living is a big factor in US politics. And people can't be criticised if they're finding that life isn't as they would like it, which is why this election is likely not to be resolved, I think, on election night and may well go to the courts.
That's what we've been hearing all day. Boris Johnson sat in that seat just a week ago and said he would be optimistic about a Donald Trump White House, and actually the world was safer with Donald Trump in the White House. No wars started under Trump, and actually his foreign policy successes have not been given the credit they deserve. Where do you stand with that?
I agree with Boris about the Abraham Accords, for example. I think the problem with Trump is that his worldview about foreign politics is that he thinks it's business, and his particular attitude to...
Well, it is when you're the one paying for NATO, though, right?
Well, look, I don't disagree with his remarks about making sure that NATO countries step up to the plate. However, to think that Putin is just another businessman with which you can do deals is naive and dangerous. He tried it with North Korea. It didn't work. My worry is that he's going to sell Ukraine down the river. There's a lot of nerves in Ukraine about what a Trump presidency might mean. We need solidarity.
But Zelensky, he met Zelensky last week. He presented his victory plan. Everyone wants a peace in Ukraine, but the easiest way to do that is Ukrainian victory. Surely Donald Trump understands as a deal maker, you could do a deal, but you've got to do a deal from a position of strength. Right?
Well, look, I hope he does. All the rhetoric and talk that we've heard so far has been rather muddled, frankly. And I think that if he's going to come back for a second term, he's going to have to listen and take advice about the fact that we need real strength when it comes to dealing with a dictator like Putin. However, the auguries are not great. He's not a man who listens to much advice. Yeah. And some of the people who were around him last time, as we know, are no longer supporting him. In fact, they're actively opposing him, which is why I'm worried.
Adam, how do you think Keir Starmer's sitting here, presumably praying for a Harris victory, right? He doesn't want to have to do the Theresa May hand-holding, suck-up tour to the Don, does he?
Well, I'm still a bit bewildered by his last trip to the United States, where he went to the UN General Assembly in New York, managed to spend 2 hours with Donald Trump,
I'd love to be a fly on the wall at that. I bet Keir Starmer's golf chat probably runs out pretty quickly.
And didn't go and see Kamala Harris.
I think he wanted to see Harris. I think there was
in Washington,
scheduling issues.
But you see, I think I actually
think
think the British Embassy in Washington have decided that Trump's going to win and they put all their eggs in that basket. And I think if Harris wins, it'll be quite awkward.
You're a man plugged into the sort of the Blairite world. These rumours about Peter Mandelson being our next US ambassador, should Harris win?
I think he said not. Peter Mandelson. I think there will be an issue. I think what I would say is I think if Harris does win, there won't be any point in keeping on the present ambassador.
Yes, I mean, she's pretty tight with Trump.
Put herself in the Trump camp. And therefore, there room for some quite big changes, quite possibly, in who goes out. But I'm just interested, you've been campaigning for her. What do you actually think of Kamala Harris?
Look, I don't think she's the perfect article. However, what I do know is that she's somebody who actually believes in the rule of law. She was a prosecutor. There are some parallels there with our current Prime Minister, but she's somebody who will operate within norms. And at the moment, we need stability and certainty from the White House. We need a predictable player in the sense that there's somebody who's going to be solid.
Isn't a predictable player what's got us into this problem? If China, Russia, or Iran can predict what the US are going to do, then we get to the situations like we're in now.
I mean, predictable in the sense that we know it's a player who will be on our side come what may. The West has got to defend its values.
Yeah.
We need solidarity in the defense of our values.
Where do you think your colleagues are, your former colleagues in the Tory party, your friends in the Tory party? Because Adam will explain this better, because there is a bit of a tradition in there. There are obviously links between the Republicans and the Conservative Party. I remember, I think Arnold Schwarzenegger once addressed Tory conference.
He did.
But then there's been...
He listened to Boris Johnson before and said, that guy's all over the place.
former MPs like, Simon Harris... who was it? Simon...
Chelmsford MP, Simon Burns.
Simon Burns was a massive Hillary fan. Yeah. So what's the relationship there?
I think the balance is basically that the Labour Party and the Liberal Democrats have always been basically pro-Democrat.
Yeah, there's 100 Labour staffers flying out right now.
The Tories have always been split, a little bit cautious about, and there have been quite prominent Tories who've, idolised Democratic presidents.
Well, Cameron and Obama being the very obvious one.
Exactly. So, the message is the message which Clinton gave to Tony Blair when he knew there was going to be a change to the Republicans, hug them tight. I mean, that tends to be... I mean, I've been in the Oval Office with quite a lot, all the Prime Ministers really going back to Mrs Thatcher, and quite often it's a bit embarrassing. I mean, they really do suck up.
The special relationship neediness drags on. Robert, you're going back out? You're going to be there for...
I'm going to be in California for the election, a very civilised election.
not exactly a swing state there.
Not exactly. I'm not going to have to stay up all night, though, and watch the results. I should be seeing them mid-evening as they come in.
I will be up all night furiously typing from somewhere. Adam Bolton, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to have you here. Robert, come again and see us soon. Good luck. Just before we go, Sam, any movements in the betting market in the last 20 minutes?
Well, it wouldn't be a surprise, would it? But look, as things stand with just over 2 weeks to go, it is Donald Trump who is the favourite with the punters in the race to the White House. Are things going to move? We've seen this market be very volatile in the past few months, but the momentum is very much with the Republican. It's all to play for.
What's the biggest bet you've seen so far?
Well, looking at the winner market, the biggest bet we've taken actually is on Kamala Harris. £88,000 wagered on her at even money. That was during the debate. We were here. We were in the studio at the time whilst the debate was going on, that presidential debate. Recently, we've taken a big bet on Donald Trump, £69,500. Wow. But when we look back 4 years ago, it's absolutely nothing compared to the £1 million that we took on Joe Biden the weekend before the election. So still 2 weeks to go, expecting lots of movement, lots of money coming in on this market.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Robert. Thank you to all of our guests. This was Never Mind The Ballots in association with our friends from Betfair. We will be back on the eve of polls from New York. Remember to subscribe on YouTube and don't miss a thing. Thank you very much and goodbye.